What's up guys, Belmont here. Today I bring you a very special video. The initially flawed but then vastly improved Blasphemous, which has a final and free DLC called Wounds of Eventide dropping tomorrow, December 9th. And yes, I will be both streaming and reviewing it, so make sure to subscribe right now so you don't miss it. A masterclass in pixel art and nightmare fuel, this game has earned a place among the greatest metroidvanias of all time. But that's not to say it's perfect, even after all of the quality of life updates it has received. And as always, I'll tell you all about it. And now, before we talk about this unholy masterpiece, I have a small message for you. I have a Patreon and a Buy Me Coffee system in place. So if you want to help me make more content like this in a more direct approach, I'll leave the links for you in the description. And hey, thank you. Now let's get going, because I have a lot to say about this unholy game. Let's hit it. I usually begin my videos discussing the gameplay, but Blasphemous aesthetics are so powerful that we simply must start the night with the main course. But do not worry, the other dishes are just as devilishly delicious. And now, this may sound weird to you, but in order for me to elucidate how much I appreciate Blasphemous aesthetics, there is one horror masterpiece I must mention: Resident Evil 1's remake. You see, many are the games that have impressed me with their beauty over the years. I still remember being left in awe after seeing Final Fantasy VIII CGI sequences for the first time. I remember a very naive teenager me thinking, man, in-game graphics are never gonna be as good as this. But you know, blame it on the folly of youth. But still, those were cinematics. As beautiful as the real game was, Squall still looked like this. When I first laid eyes on Resi 1's remake, and on the Nintendo Wii, not the original GameCube release, the game hit me like a sledgehammer. Its atmosphere was crafted to perfection. Every single room had been redone with utmost care. The character models were stunning. Well, I mean, if Julia Voth is involved, things are bound to look beautiful one way or another. Really, this is one of the few things in the world you just can't mess up. What made me really begin appreciating games to the best of my abilities were a few things that have always been present in the franchise, but no one ever seems to mention. Yes, I'm talking about the paintings. To be more specific, the very first painting you see not even 5 minutes after starting the game. I stood there for what felt like a long time, just admiring the level of detail and beauty present in such a fickle thing most people would be likely to forget. And from that day onward, whenever I play a new game, I always make a point of taking it slow the very first time I play a game, so I can soak in as much beauty as I possibly can. Which brings us back to Blasphemous. The very first section is very impactful by itself. You see a pile of penitent ones who have failed in their quest, and they stretch as far as the eye can see. This is one truly grotesque scene, which isn't even remotely the most disturbing thing you'll see in this game. Wait until you get to see this game's hitboxes, then you'll know what grotesque really is. Among other things, you'll see executions, people inflicting pain upon themselves, a burned woman, impaled corpses, a baby being held by a wicker woman, and this guy. Jesus fucking Christ, what the hell is wrong with him? Christ! But to me, Blasphemous' brilliance in its aesthetics lies beyond the unholy. Its overall presentation is exceedingly well detailed. Many were the times where I'd actually pause for a beat just to admire its landscapes, NPCs, and bosses. And to further drive my point home, I'll say something that may seem contradictory at first, but bear with me. You see, I don't give a rat's ass about this game's theme. The whole idea of suffering, punishment, penitence, and all that, I think it's silly. I do. You know, I'll find an item containing a piece of lore and go, meh. However, as silly as I think the game's theme may be, it's presented in such a magnificent way through its cutscene, extremely well-made NPCs and atmosphere, that Blasphemous draws nothing but admiration from me at all the visual work they've done. And this stands as a testament to the sheer attention to detail presented in this game. Even though I don't care for its theme, I can't help but admire it and look forward to what they're gonna present us next. It's so beautiful at every single step of your journey. Really, I can't think of a single 2D game that's prettier than this. Let me know in the comments if you can, because I'll be sure to check it out. And who knows, if I like it, I may end up bringing it to you guys. So type away. And now, moving on to the gameplay. It's a mixed bag, but with a largely positive outcome. This isn't a regular Metroidvania, you know, in the sense that you'll be moving at a somewhat quick pace while exploring the game's world. Combat is much more unforgiving and slower paced. Now, I know we all roll our eyes whenever someone says that something is like a something else Dark Souls. God damn it, we have shitty game journalists to blame for that. Thank you so much, guys. You've done us all a great disservice. fuckheads. However, I do understand whenever someone claims that Blasphemous combat resembles From Software's masterpiece. Mistakes in combat can cost you dearly, especially during early stages in the game. You need to watch out for enemy patterns and memorize their attacks and tells. Spamming attacks will only get you so far, especially against stronger enemies, and there's also the addition of parrying. Now this is something I particularly tend to think of as a red flag. Many games that have parry mechanics don't really do it all that well, it's pretty much half-assed. Blasphemous, however, manages to implement it with grace, especially if you equip the booster that lengthens your parry window by a certain amount. I found myself parrying many enemies throughout my run, and doing so was not only satisfying but also yielded some jaw-dropping pixel art executions. However, parrying is not all there is to Blasphemous. No. Throughout your journey of penitence, you'll be able to acquire a few upgrades for the Mea Culpa, your blade. While they don't offer much in terms of variety, most of them are functional and actually useful. And to be honest, I never felt bored with whatever attack options I had at my disposal. Now remember this because I'll mention it again when I speak about navigating through the game's map. To further sweeten the deal, or should I say ease your burden, you'll find many equipable items which provide bonuses such as faster slide recovery time, faster spell casting, less cooldown time between slides, increased tears, which work as the game's currency, and quite a few others. And from what I was able to gather on my playthrough, which was a lot, but I'm sure I missed some, what I saw here was balance. Yes, sure, some of them were almost useless, but a good deal of them would offer specific buffs that, while helpful, never broke the game whatsoever. At least to my knowledge, of course. Let me know if you found something I didn't. We also have a very gory version of the Estus Flask. And besides being able to increase your capacity, you can increase its potency. Your millage may vary, but I found that, at least on a standard vanilla run, 2 increases in potency were more than sufficient. Now, you may be asking yourself, wait, why would I want to go beyond 2 boosts? Well, because this is Blasphemous, and the keyword here is fuck you. Nah, I'm just kidding. You see, every potency increase requires you to sacrifice 1 Estus bottle permanently. However, the increase in your health regen is substantial, so there's a nice balance here. This was another clever detail. However, not everything is sunshine and oh my god. You know what I meant. Blasphemous has one glaring problem which will show its ugly fangs at you more oftenly than you'd like. It has some of the worst hitboxes I have ever seen in a modern video game. Seriously, I lost count of how many times I got hit by an attack that had absolutely no way of so much as grazing me. And this led to some pretty frustrating moments, and the developers never having properly fixed that feels odd given the amount of work they put into this game. But in the end, even with moments that would give Dark Souls lag stabs a good run for their money, Blasphemous still managed to keep me hooked throughout my entire playthrough. Which leads us to our next topic, exploration. To put it simply, Blasphemous has a gargantuan amount of items for you to find and quests for you to clear, out of which I think I didn't clear a single one. But I know they're there, okay? And your quest for loot hogging will happen in a good variety of areas, all with a distinct feel and design to them. My favorite one? The Snowy Peaks, of course. God damn it, talk about a beautiful place. It's actually even soothing. Yes, in Blasphemous. And speaking of this place, I couldn't help but grin as soon as I noticed the wind effect being shown with the snow. That's Ninja Gaiden 2 right there, brother. And I appreciate this nod to this hellish game, which gave me nightmares as a kid. Which, now that I think about it, it's funny. Ninja Gaiden has 0 nightmare fuel enemies and places, but out of the 2, it is the one people will forever have nightmares about. I still dream about birds knocking me off cliffs. I don't know, maybe it's just the curse of the Belmonts to be knocked off by birds wherever they go. So subscribe now to help me get over the trauma of birds. And to further aid you on your exploration, you have the ability to insert different markers on your map so you can manually assign each of them a specific type of situation. Unreachable chest, item behind wall, and so on and so forth. This should be the new standard for all metroidvanias that have maps, really. It's high time this became a standard. Now, here's where things went south when the game was first released and were somewhat remedied in one of its updates. You see, throughout the game, you'll find a few portals which will enable you to travel through different areas. Pretty much like in Symphony of the Night, Aria of Sorrow, and other games. However, there is a catch the developers themselves didn't see when first releasing this game. In a regular Metroidvania, so to speak, Going to and fro is a much faster process. Even if you don't warp, you can easily jump over enemies, and there are little to no death traps, which Blasphemous has plenty of. As a matter of fact, I think I was able to create a new genre of death, the pixel perfect fuck up. I mean, look at this. God, it's ridiculous. Even Dark Souls with its three-dimensional environment gives you either a lot of space to maneuver around enemies and run like a madman, or a map layout that still makes for speed strategies once you understand the area's basic concepts. But you know, Blasphemous doesn't. Your options to bypass enemies are limited, and they have dodgy hitboxes. And when you're lost trying to figure out where the hell to go next, this will take its toll on you. Now granted, I didn't get lost many times on my playthrough, but hey, that was me. I lucked out.
Hold it!
I'm gonna pull a Miles Edgeworth right now and say an update on the case was released. The only difference is I'll not be pulling it out of my ass. In one of the game's updates, the developers either got feedback about it or caught on it by themselves, perhaps both. So they added the possibility of enabling fast travel system between bonfires. And listen. Whenever something resembles Dark Souls, my brain is hardwired to use Dark Souls terms, so I'll never remember what those are actually called in Blasphemous. Really, it's done. Dark Souls has done its damage. Don't even bother trying to help me. But its implementation was somewhat poor, I'm afraid. Let me explain. In order to enable warping between bonfires, you need to donate 20,000 tears to the church that can be found early into the game. And there's a few problems with this. First off, that's a lot. Okay, 20,000 tears is a lot considering that you also have to spend those very same tears for your sword upgrades. And remember how a few minutes ago when talking about the Mea Culpa, I told you to remember when I said that, to be honest, I never felt bored with whatever attack options I had at my disposal. Well, that's the reason. I only ever bought 1 or 2 upgrades for my sword, let alone items sold by the shopkeeper until I was able to get those bonfire warps going. And no amazing chest I had there. Sad face. And the second and perhaps biggest problem is that if you don't read about it anywhere, there's a good chance you completely miss out on this. And we're talking about quality of life update, it's not a secret weapon or anything like that, so yes, even though after enabling the bonfire warp, exploring becomes much more dynamic, the fact that it's hard to know this feature is actually there, but hidden and needs to be unlocked with tears, felt more like a design flaw than anything, really. The ability to warp in a game should always be laid out as explicitly as possible to the player. Period. But again, once you enable the bonfire warp, exploring this game becomes a dream. And now, let's talk combat. The Penitent One has quite a few tools at his disposal, like different spells and unlockable combat moves. They all work very well within the game's design. I only have one observation to make though. The slide attack has a very strict timing to be performed. Attack a little too soon or a little too late and you'll do a regular attack. There was no real need for this, really. I see it more as an oversight in design than anything. And it's a good thing the Penitent One is a very competent fighter because there's quite a variety of enemies for you to face. And once again, I must mention the ridiculously detailed sprites created for this game. Even not connecting with all the doom and gloom this game brings, I admired every single one of them. There's a lot of creativity here, all while maintaining a very cohesive design. Brilliant! And speaking of design, let's talk bosses. Creativity ran high in this department as well. You see, the basic idea of having unique bosses in each area is to make the player face challenges that are very distinct from one another. And while that certainly isn't the case for a lot of games where all we get are cosmetic changes and maybe a few different stupid attacks, Blasphemous goes the whole 9 yards and delivers challenges that are as distinct as they possibly could be from one another. In my opinion, one of the most interesting bosses is Our Lady of the Charred Visage. It's actually a nod to shooting games that, while it can certainly get challenging, it's no bullet hell like Toho was. But make no mistake, all of them are interesting fights. From the Tres Angustias to Curse, Melquiades, and Chrysanta, that colossal bitch. They all have very distinct personalities. Take Quirce, for example. He has quite a few different moves, and they're all learnable. It didn't take me long to off him, but the battle was more than satisfying. And speaking of Chrysanta, the moment I learned I could parry her, I sent her 9 different ways to hell. And the fact that I was able to parry one of the game's final bosses felt amazing and very satisfying. Parrying attacks does make us feel superior. It's like, get the fuck out of here, kid. And now let's talk about the soundtrack. As a musician, this is one of the other aspects that made me love this game so much. You see, this game has one of the most brilliantly composed scores I have ever heard. Just listen to Entregarás tu rostro a la señora and Cantes, I'm sorry for my Spanish, Cantes de Confesión. I actually stopped quite a few times and just enjoyed the sonic greatness Blasphemous has to offer. Really, me enjoying a game's soundtrack isn't something that's very uncommon, but me admiring a game's soundtrack doesn't happen so often. And those two are just a few of this game's expertly created songs. Really, head over to YouTube, Spotify, find those songs wherever you can, and give them a good listen. You be in bliss. Unholy bliss. So even though Blasphemous had several faults upon its initial release that actually made me drop the game, when I decided to give this game another go a few weeks ago, it was a vastly superior experience, making it one of my favorite metroidvanias of all time, earning it a much respectable 9 out of 10. If the game didn't have those hitbox issues, it would be a straight 10. And remember, I will be both streaming and reviewing the new and final DLC for the first Blasphemous, so make sure to subscribe so you don't miss it. And if you like this review, then consider checking out my Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee pages to further support my work. So if you were on the fence about buying this game, about playing this game, then by all means, do so. It's a much better game than when it was originally released, and we have a brand new DLC that's just coming out tomorrow. So go for it, go hard, go deep, and suffer. Balamun out.